I'm really grateful to be able to be here. Stephanie and I had the opportunity to sort of collide. I'm a former chemistry teacher, so I think a little bit about reactions and molecules and those kinds of things. But we collided because we were shared a hallway together when you were first new and I was still brand new. I still consider myself new at 5 years. And we also served on the Armed Services Committee together. And the first year that Stephanie was here and the year that paid leave was passed for federal employees. 12 weeks of paid leave was one of the things that our office worked on to make that happen. And so we've formed a very good friendship as a result of having a lot in common. And when it came to understanding what it was that we could uniquely do in this very tumultuous time in Congress to try to steady families and to study the nation, paid leave seemed to be the best place to start. And so we started this group.
So Chrissy talked a little bit about kind of how we met, but I think the other thing that's sort of fascinating is we have a lot of commonalities, or similarities, I should say. We both have 2 daughters. We both love hot tea. And so instead of going and getting coffee together, we go get tea together. But I think we also both recognize that this is something that we have different perspectives on. Coming from a military background and not having any leave time after giving birth was very difficult for Chrissy. For me, it was actually, I was in a unique position. I have 2 daughters that are now 22 and 19. And when I had my oldest daughter, I worked for a company 22 years ago that actually offered paid family leave. I didn't know how rare that was. And I was given 6 weeks of paid leave along with any vacation time that I had. And so we come at this from different perspectives, but also recognizing that this is something that has to happen. We are one of 7 countries, developed countries in the world, that don't have a paid family leave policy. And so when we were, approached about this, we decided to take it on, and here we are.
So what we did is we organized a very small working group. There's 6 of us, 3 on each side, Republican and Democrat, and we collaborate as well on the Senate side with a similarly sized group that is working on similarly on this issue. And I think it was kind of the catalyst might have been the 30th anniversary of the FMLA, unpaid family leave, and the idea that there had to clearly be something more that we could do, as Stephanie said, to join the industrialized world and having a more robust paid leave program. And so what we decided to do is level set. We decided to spend the first 6 to 9 months really making sure that we all understood the issue together. I think in Congress and Washington, we tend to do things in silos and separately. We listen to different information streams. And what we tried to do with the first 6 to 9 months was have very regular meetings, both with the members and also with staff, to try to understand what FMLA did and how it was successful or not successful, what other states are doing. And I think this is part of the reason why this is important right now. 13 states already are moving forward, and many more are teed up to do that. And we are at a pivot point right now that if we don't do something at the federal level, it will be done for us around the country, and it will become really very difficult for business and, frankly, humans to manage that splintering. We then talked about what those states had done. We talked with a lot of different stakeholders in various places to make sure we understood what had worked or not worked the last time, meaning a couple years ago that this didn't happen, made it to the cliff and then didn't happen. And now we're at a place where we're trying to kind of synthesize all of our ideas together into kind of a white paper for those of us who are on the tech side of things or the science side of things, or just a straw man at this point.
And I think taking that time to walk through all of the stakeholders and really gain an understanding of what the nuances are, especially with states, what they're doing as we work to try to put something together. We needed to understand all of that. And I would also say, for maybe to my surprise, there's a lot of interest in this topic, not only on our side, but across the rotunda and the Senate side. You've had several of the senators working on different initiatives. Some have been sort of palatable, some have not. But they are very engaged and want to be part of the conversation. And so it's a maybe exciting thing for us that we're not just doing this independently, we actually have some traction on the other side of the rotunda to be able to get something done. Do we think it'll be easy? No, we do not. We recognize fully that this is going to be a challenge, and we want to get it done next year, but also recognizing it could be challenging to do that. We'll see how next year shapes up. But I think we're both committed to trying to figure out how to make this happen, because it's incredibly important. And as the mother of daughters, both of us, who maybe someday will be mothers themselves, we want to make sure that we're providing that leave ability for them in their professional career.
And so, really importantly, we're not trying to solve for this huge problem with one fell swoop and one solution. We're trying to parse this out. And our mantra, our motto is more paid leave for more people. It's not necessarily solve this problem. And I think that that's important. And I also think, even though this is a very fractured and difficult time in Congress and in the country, it's true. It's true. That actually we can take advantage of because we have slim majorities, slim minorities, and we have the American people and American business all saying the same thing, which is we need to do something about this. And so I think there's pressure on both sides, so to speak, to try to figure out what something means. And so I think we have a really unique opportunity in this environment, and maybe one that we wouldn't have if we had wider majorities or minorities on either side.
I think it would be really great to maybe open it up for questions from you all.
Okay, great. Thank you both very much.
Amy, I didn't hear what you're thinking about tackling the part-time workforce. So for us, it's 29 hours and under, but that's the hard part, right? At least for us, and how do we manage that?
Sure. That's actually a conversation we had very early on. We recognized that we wanted to sort of stick with the framework of FMLA if we could, because that has worked for 30 years. Why deviate from that? But we also recognize that there are many individuals, particularly now, that are in the workforce on an hourly basis, whether it's retail, whether it's food service, you name it. How do we navigate that? And there are some ways that we can do that. It will be, I think, a conversation with industry as to what do those thresholds look like. In addition to number of hours, we also need to think about how long do they need to be employed. For an organization like yours, it probably is not wise for us to look at a 30-day employment time frame. So those are the pieces of the puzzle that we are starting to sort of map out now after having spent the 9 months researching and doing a deep dive into all of the various areas of this and the stakeholders. It is important though, and we've discussed it many times, that we figure out, is there a way for us to make that happen? Because we do recognize that's probably the area that most needs this help, right? Because they don't have access to that. Whereas someone working in a corporate environment may have a short-term disability option. Their company may provide family leave. It's those individuals that are hourly that don't have that option.
Yeah, you did a perfect job describing it. It is one of the hardest things to talk about, and the FMLA is sort of our baseline, and we're sort of at a federal level trying to set that baseline and trying to harmonize what other states are doing. But we really do have, I think, a shared interest in making sure that the majority of people who don't have access to this kind of program are helped. And those tend to be hourly workers. They tend to be not part-time workers per se, but people who are in, as you mentioned, retail, food services, those kinds of things. And that benefits all of us if we have the ability to talk about that.
And I will also offer up, we often talk about it from the mom's perspective, but I think it's incredibly important that dads are also engaged in this conversation, right? When I got to Congress, my chief of staff said we need an employee handbook. We have to write all these policies. I didn't know that I was also going to, basically run my own business when I got to Congress. But that conversation came up, and she said, "What are we going to do about a paid leave option?" And we decided in my office that we would do 12 weeks paid leave for the birth of a child. And I have a deputy chief of staff that is a male. And upon the birth of both of his children, he has taken leave. And I think that is an incredibly wonderful thing for families to have the time to bond and to be together, and for dad to be a part of that. It isn't always, shouldn't always be just mom that's sort of bearing that brunt.
And that's becoming increasingly more welcomed and popular in Congress. You may or may not have noticed that there's now a dad caucus, and I think that's
And one of them is part of our group.
yeah, exactly. And I think that that's in response to gentlemen in the House recognizing that they also many of them have small children too, and so they're starting to be leaders in this space too. So it's good that it's not just chicks, who are thinking about this.
Great answer. Ralph Hellman, I think you said you had a question.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. Really appreciate it, and thank you, Chrissy. I hope
It's not so scary.
tell your friends. Thank you. I mean, it's been 30 years, but there've been slight progress. So you said 13 states or 12 or 13 states that are doing this. You did a great job on the NDAA a couple years back. So federal employees are covered. I know a lot of larger businesses now provide it that didn't do it, labor unions. So there's still a huge gap, and it's probably small and medium-sized businesses and purple and red states that don't have coverage. So as you look at solutions, as you move from the scoping the problem out to the solution phase, are there certain things that are beginning to jump out as good options, like something on the tax code? Is there maybe repurposing a current block grant program, or looking at
Maybe onto
something,
Has he been reading our documents? I feel like
or looking at an entitlement program that could, you could adjust it for.
don't say the E word,
I know.
Ralph. Come on.
There are there
Help
Feel
me out
even
here.
more welcome.
there are red lines for each side. There are red lines for each side. On the right, you don't want to mandate, you don't want a tax increase, you don't want to create new entitlements, and on the Democratic side, it's like, why don't we do what DeLauro and Biden called for? So what are some of the ideas you guys are thinking about?
What you named. Seriously, small business pooling for insurance. There is some tax credit available right now. Nobody uses it. And we need to figure out why and make more people able to use it. But that doesn't solve for the hourly problem that we were talking about. To your point, public-private partnerships that would take advantage of things that would traditionally be called block grants, where we could maybe at a federal level prime the pump for states to be able to start their own processes. Those are some of the things that we're looking at doing. We don't want to, for bigger companies that have already got this going on, we don't want to make them feel like they have to do anything different. And in many cases, those bigger companies are doing more than we would probably, collectively decide upon at the federal level. For smaller companies, we want to make it easier for them to be able to do that, hence the sort of pooling of resources idea. We're just trying to stop this state train right now, because it really is getting complicated. With climate issues, and I know that this is not the subject, but when the Pentagon and the Pope are both saying the same thing, you've got an issue right here with this issue. When you've got the Chamber of Commerce and Rosa DeLauro saying something, you've got an issue. And so we've really got to figure out how to solve for each one of those kinds of businesses or places. And I think those are some of the ideas that we have. And you are reading our notes.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things that we really want to figure out is in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, there was a 45S program that was put in place that was passed at the end of 17, enacted really in 18, launched in 19. Unfortunately, COVID sort of cut the knees out from that program. And so we aren't really sure how effective it is because we didn't get enough data before COVID hit to make any sort of great decisions on that. So what we want to do is we're getting information and data to vet, who participated, why did they participate, what's the participation rate, but then also look at, can we offer some sort of tax credit? Can we offer some sort of incentive for companies to participate, particularly larger ones to participate, tying that to the 45S? Is that an option? Excuse me. The block grant program is something that I think Chrissy's been pretty passionate about, figuring out which states do not have a program and can we incentivize them. The only maybe concern I have is, what do you do about states that have already offered it? Are they going to feel like they've been slighted because they kind of took the initiative and have already jumped in both feet? But to that end, we also recognize that states are doing it differently. And we want to be mindful of that so that we're not overstepping them and then forcing them to do something that's going to be complicated for them, because then that sort of undercuts, our ability to get our members on board. So figuring out how to navigate the states could be probably one of the more challenging pieces of this, because they already have programs that have been set up, whether it is, small business pooling or insurance programs, or a fee, payroll tax fee that is mandated, and offered through their state programs. I mean, these are the things that we're trying to work.
Yeah, we're trying to shamelessly steal in the places where things are working, but also not try to make everybody change the way they're doing things. But that being said, the train is leaving the station really fast, and we don't have time is not on our side on this, and we need to move quickly.
Minister Ishigaki,
Thank you very much for this great conversation. You may think that this is a very U.S. domestic policy and issues, but it's definitely international, and it affects pretty much everyone. Because I think many Japanese would be shocked to hear that you don't really have a nationwide system. But at the same time, many Japanese also think that the U.S. is far ahead in mobilizing women and everyone in the workforce, and especially in the executive and leadership positions. So yes, we have the same issue about part-time workers, even though the mobilization of women in workforce is higher in Japan, but the majority of them are part-time workers, and which also have a challenges similar to what you have mentioned. So raising this kind of awareness and conversation that you have already done, we see in Japan, that in your previous visit, and I believe that Stephanie, you'll be going to Japan, it will be something that everyone would be going to ask you, especially women in the leadership positions. So I'd like to maybe get sort of advanced question, especially for your upcoming visit. Why do you think is the reluctance to have the federal system? Whether is it because of the federalism that you mentioned, that everyone wants to do things on their own, or in Japan, many of the burden is the reluctance is from the small and medium-sized businesses, that they think that this is too burdensome to actually have this system that is almost equal to the big business. Do it. The system that we have is actually not from the companies that they have their own system, but it's the employment insurance system that you sort of pay annual month, but you'll be entitled to get 2/3 for a full year of the paid leave. Yes. And then if they decide to extend 50% of the monthly pay for until 2 years old. But
We're
again,
doing it wrong, I think.
but again, some people find it is very burdensome. But of course, for the other municipalities, they'll actually go out of further way and to say that cities would pay you additional for child raising and others.
Well, I think to your point, and we've had a robust conversation around this issue. If you're a smaller business and you have 25% of your workforce is gone for a year, and you can't replace that individual because of FMLA, that makes it very difficult for that business to function. So I absolutely understand why your small, medium-sized businesses are going to be reluctant to want to participate in something that is going to hinder their ability to actually be successful. And we are keenly aware of that as well. When we met with small business owners in the chambers, that was one of the conversations that we had was, what do we do about these businesses that are going to be severely impacted by offering a paid option?
Well, I agree. It is you've hit both of the things. Why is it a federal issue, or why is this so hard? And also, it's hard because small and mid-sized businesses struggle with this. What I would also push back on, though, is that you read my bio. I spent a lot of time as an entrepreneur and growing businesses that hopefully do right by the bottom line, but also by their employees and the community and environment. And I would argue that having been the 8th person in AND1, the first woman in AND1, the person who mandated healthcare, the person who mandated family leave, the person who did all of those things, the reason why AND1 was successful, or part of the reason, in addition to cool shit, it's cool stuff, was that we cared. That we identified that you were part of the family, and that you were going to be taken care of, and we were going to take care of each other. And so I think that even though it is hard to be a company of 20 people and 2 people are gone, or 4 people, it is also, I think, better for the business to take care of people. And so the other thing that we heard from some of our smaller businesses is those smaller businesses tend to be familial in some cases too, not necessarily directly, blood related, but people who know each other. And so they want to take care of each other too. And so having some sort of a program, a formal program, is helpful as well.
I would also just add to, I'm always envious of the way that the Japanese culture has a generational sort of connection, in that many parents and children and grandchildren live together or live in close proximity. And I think that's really something that we don't do well here in this country, is that living together and having the younger generations be, connected to those older generations in that way. There's something to be said for that.